So today's show is really personal. I wasn't going to do it until my wife talked me into it because it's very personal. The other day I was doing some organizing and I found buried treasure. It's a paper that I wrote back in junior high about my late father. The assignment back then was to do this report. It's like a book report on something that your parents were passionate about. You interview your mom or your dad. Well, my dad passed away almost 7 years ago. So this is a really precious memory to read this paper. And my dad and I, as you know, if you've watched the show, we always connected through music. He's the reason I do what I do. I did the paper on his favorite songs of all time. So coming up next, I'm going to count down my dad's top 10 and tell you the stories from both the history of the song and his own stories behind them. You know, and I would tell you to do the same thing. Interview your parents or your kids about their favorite songs and why they are their favorite songs. And it's a piece of history that you'll definitely want to do. So getting into number 10, he chose Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, or Tom Petty actually off his solo album, Full Moon Fever, Free Fallin'. His zeal, my dad's zeal for the music of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, it rubbed off on me for sure. We both loved Free Fallin' with equal enthusiasm. So I remember he picked me up from football practice one day. He had just bought Full Moon Fever and he was playing in his truck. Yes, I played football in junior high, believe it or not. When the song came on, it was a no-brainer and we couldn't help but sing it to the top of our lungs. There's a great memory of us singing that song. But Free Fallin' really is like that great sing-along song. I mean, you remember when Tom Cruise did it on Jerry Maguire. Everybody just sings along to it. And my dad and I, we definitely did that. Now, a little known story about Tom Petty's Free Fallin' is that the lyrics were just an off-the-cuff joke that he was trying just to crack up his collaborator, the great Jeff Lynne from ELO, right? He was the one producing the album. They're just sitting there in the studio and Tom Petty, he was at the keyboard playing the main riff and Jeff Lynne was suggesting that he cut a chord to simplify the song. And Tom Petty was trying to be funny for his friend, and he actually ripped the whole opening line just right then and there. You know, she's a good girl. She loves her mama. She loves Jesus, and she loves America and Elvis. And Jeff Lynne couldn't stop laughing. He's like, you know what? That's really good. You should use that. Tom Petty was surprised because he just pulled it out of thin air, and it was a joke, but he rolled with it. Good, loves her mama. And then when they got to the chorus, Petty wasn't sure what to sing, and so Jeff Lynne leaned over and suggested the title Free Fallin'. And then Tom Petty just improvised a vocal melody for the chorus, taking his voice up an octave to fit that phrase, and the song basically just sprang from that casual joke. And it became his biggest solo hit. Two of them wrote it, and they recorded the track in just a couple days, and Petty finished the rest of the lyrics that very night, and he drew inspiration from some of the things that he was seeing on Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles and stuff. Move west down Ventura Boulevard. My dad just always loved Tom Petty. He would always play the greatest hits album, and we'd get really, really into it, so much so that we would forget what we were doing. He's a painting contractor, so he'd mess up some of the things he was spraying because he was singing along. My dad was great. All right, so my dad's pick at number 9 was one that he told me he bought the 45 record the day that it first was released in stores. It's Tommy James and the Shondells with Crimson and Clover. Crimson and Clover. My dad always told me that he felt that Tommy James was one of the most underrated artists of the rock era. I was raised on all of his hit songs, so when I got a chance to interview Tommy in Las Vegas, this is back when my dad was still alive. I actually set up a little phone call for the two of them to talk. I asked Tommy if it would be okay. I don't normally do that, but my dad just was such a Tommy fan. And he was very gracious, and he and my dad hit it off. They had a great conversation about music. It was just fun to watch. I mean, I wasn't there. I was there with Tommy. And I could see how much fun Tommy was having. But my dad was I know he was having a great time. I could just see him just hear his excitement over the phone. It was definitely one of my favorite moments that I ever had interviewing somebody. And again, Tommy just is such a gentleman. So Tommy James, there's a lot of great history behind Crimson and Clover. It's way ahead of its time. He woke up with the phrase Crimson and Clover stuck in his head. He found it poetic and visually striking, even if he wasn't sure what the hell it meant, Tommy has his own take on the inspiration. He actually connected it to his favorite color and his favorite flower, Crimson and Clover. While Shondel's drummer Peter Lucia Jr. suggested the title came from a high school football thing, the Crimson, which means, anyway, who knows? But in the end, the exact origin of the idea isn't really that important. It's what the song did sonically, how it makes us feel. I mean, the way the vibrato and the tremolo were incorporated into the recording of Crimson and Clover created a sound that nobody had ever heard before. It was otherworldly. Released in 1968 by Tommy James and the Shondells, the track features a guitar plugged directly into the mixing console, direct input, and then heavily modulated with tremolo, giving it a distinctive warbling texture. It was totally new to pop music. And of course, in the final minute of the song where there's that incredible vocal effect, it's just ethereal. And to get that, Tommy ran his voice through an Ampex 440 tape machine, and he tweaked the speed to get that warbling vibrato, which of course added to the psychedelic atmosphere of the song. A pioneering piece of production, something that pushed the technical boundaries of home studio possibilities. And it definitely elevated my dad's appreciation for the number one hit. He told me the first time he heard it on the radio, he was floored. He and his friends had never heard a song that sounded like that. And of course, he rushed to the store to get it. What I've always appreciated about Crimson and Clover, though, is that even though it's close to 60 years old, it still sounds cool and innovative today. It sounds amazing. The kicker of this one is that Tommy had an unfinished demo of the song. It wasn't even finished. He was still working on it. He brought it to the radio station to give a DJ friend of his a sneak peek of the rough demo. And then all hell broke loose. Here's what Tommy told me.
And I took it up to WLS, which at that time was the biggest station in the country.
Oh, yeah.
And I play it for John Rook, the PD. And he says, "Oh, that's great." And now this is a rough mix. And then he plays it for Larry Lujak, who had just come on board, the big disc jockey there. And unbeknownst to me, they taped it. It taped my tape. And I go back down to the car, get in the car, and I hear world exclusive on WLS. Oh, and they're playing my rough mix. They're not supposed to be playing that. And I never got a chance to mix the record. That's a true story.
And the reaction is so huge that you just have to rush out, and you had to learn to live with it, right?
I cringed every time I heard it, but yeah, I learned to like it actually.
But that's kind of what made it that
after it sold a million.
Yeah.
That's a true story.
All right, coming in at number 8, my dad chose the Man in Black, Johnny Cash, with Folsom Prison Blues.
Hear the train a-coming, it's rolling around a bend, and
my dad and my grandpa, for that matter, were both huge admirers of Johnny Cash. Great admirers. I think it's because, Johnny spoke for the working man. I mean, both my grandpa and my dad were blue-collar guys. My grandpa was a mechanic by trade with a 4th grade education. He had to quit school to help on the farm after the Great Depression. It crippled so many families back then. And my dad, he was a painting contractor, as I've mentioned. They both worked long hours, and man, they made a lot of sacrifices to earn a living and provide. Johnny Cash's music, it spoke to both of them on a very deep level. My dad would always tell me stories about the Man in Black coming on the radio. He was only a kid in the 50s when he first came out. Johnny Cash's music was truly cinema of the mind, painting pictures of adventure and struggle and redemption. And it just always stopped you dead in your tracks.
train keeps a rolling on down to San Antonio.
Oh man, Folsom Prison Blues, any song by Johnny Cash takes me back. because my dad would play it in the shop, but also my grandpa used to play it all the time. He had this old truck that he was restoring, and he always had Johnny Cash 8-tracks playing in his little shop, his mechanic shop that he had. It's just great. Johnny Cash wrote Folsom Prison Blues after seeing the movie Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison while he was in the Air Force in Germany, blending cinematic drama with the stark realities of confinement. The song, it taps into a universal feeling of being trapped, whether by physical bars or by the trappings of our minds. So many great lines like, I know I had it coming, I know I can't be free, but those people keep a moving, and that's what tortures me.
And that's what tortures me.
Folsom Prison Blues is a deft blend of, the train song rhythm, those chugging locomotive-like sounds, and the prison song mood, creating this distinctive sound that really helped define the one-of-a-kind style of the Man in Black. My dad, he always told me the opening line was one of the best in music history.
Hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around a bend, and I ain't seen...
He had the iconic 1968 live recording of Folsom Prison Blues from Folsom Prison, which captured that raw energy and the crowd's connection, turning the song into a powerful anthem for prisoners and really reinforcing Johnny's Man in Black image.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Johnny felt a deep empathy for prisoners, seeing them really as outsiders, and the prison concerts, they were a genuine effort to give them a voice to those who couldn't be heard. Johnny stated that the prison audience at Folsom was the most enthusiastic he'd ever played for. It was also the track where Johnny connected with a whole new generation, and he did that so many times in his career.
Lonesome whistle, blow my blues away.
All right, coming in number 7, I have my dad's favorite solo artist ever, Bob Dylan, with Like a Rolling Stone. My dad always told me that Bob was the greatest lyricist in rock history. And of course, I would argue that it was Morrissey. He'd just laugh. Who's Morrissey? He'd say, without Bob Dylan, popular music would have no soul. Now, Like a Rolling Stone was the first Dylan song he showed me. And whenever we'd argue about best lyricist or best lyrics, he'd throw this one on, and I would immediately lose the argument because it's a perfect song with lyrics that just set you free. And my dad recognized that it represented a pivotal moment in Bob Dylan's career, where personal frustration led to a revolutionary artistic statement that transformed popular music forever, going from folk to rock. After a grueling 1965 tour that left him exhausted and questioning whether he even wanted to keep making music at all, Bob Dylan unleashed a creative explosion. This thing was a 20-page long piece of vomit of verse and lyrics that he whittled down into the song's lean, piercing lyrics that it became. That burst of frustration became a turning point, a decision for Bob to channel everything into something sharper and more electric than anything he'd done before. And with that, the song became the lead single for Highway 61 Revisited. It was a bold pivot from folk toward, like I said, electric rock. It wasn't just a new sound, though. It was a declaration that he was leaving behind that acoustic template in favor of something scarier, louder, and really more transformative. And the recording session was just as historic.
Gone to the finest school, all right, Miss Lonely, but you know you only...
And my dad told me that story, and it's one of the first stories I remember him telling me about how a song, a little happy accident happened, a little improv magic that made it so. Basically, Tom Wilson, who was producing the record, he brought a young kid in named Al Cooper. Now, Al Cooper had done some sessions as a guitarist, but he was just there to watch. Bob Dylan's out there playing. Tom Wilson had to leave the studio to make a phone call, and I guess Al Cooper had this crazy idea that he wanted to play on this song. He was such a Dylan fan. So he went out and stood behind the organ. Now, he was a guitar player. He didn't even know how to play the organ. And there was an organ player, but he actually moved to the piano because they weren't going to use any organ in it. And so he started playing the organ because Tom Wilson was gone, and they started recording. And the sessions were really bad. They had done take after take after take, and nothing was working. And so as Al Cooper is sitting there, he didn't know the chords for the song, so he kind of had to pause and wait for a second. And that pause and where he played that organ, it just brought a magic to the song. And when Tom Wilson got in, he's like, what are you doing? What's this kid doing here? He sneaks into a session. Well, later when they were listening to playback, Bob Dylan could hear that organ. He's like, turn that up. He turned it up and he's like, I want that. I want that organ. Now they tried to replay it, have somebody else play it, is what they say. But it didn't match that magic, that improv vibe that happened without Cooper playing it. So just the magic in it.
How does it feel?
My dad would always say, this is what freedom sounds like, this song. And he was so true. It's a mix of blistering honesty, audacious reinvention, and open interpretation that everybody has with the lyrics that make Like a Rolling Stone feel just timeless. And I love that song.
Like a rolling stone.
So coming in at number 6 on my dad's countdown, he went with Simon and Garfunkel, and he went with a song that I was a little surprised. I thought he would say, Sounds of Silence or Mrs. Robinson, but it was Scarborough Fair.
Are you going to Scarborough Fair?
My dad always told me that Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel had this incredible way of turning soft poetic intricacies into social commentary. And they did it without preaching or coming off as self-righteous. He'd tell me that they spoke for his generation as well as any artist or band without really trying to. And this was his favorite song by them. Again, I was surprised. Great example of the genius of Simon and Garfunkel, though, is this song. I mean, this song was much more than just a medieval tale for fun. That's how I said to my dad, it sounds medieval. It became a quiet, powerful protest when Simon and Garfunkel paired the old ballad's impossible tasks with Paul Simon's anti-war hymn.
Remember me to one who lives there.
By weaving those classic riddles with lines that spoke to that unmerciful war, the song turned the herbs and trials into symbols of what soldiers faced, virtue and danger and death, and showed how the war in Vietnam at the time was unwinnable.
To make me a kind of shirt.
Now, this is the part of the paper that I actually got the most comments from my teacher, and why I got an A on the paper is because we talked about Vietnam and my dad's feelings at that time, because my dad got a draft number, and he would have gone and fought in Vietnam. He actually certainly had friends who did. And he was, I actually had a real discussion with my dad at that time about his fears and his excitements and the things that he was going through. He never got called, like I said, but he did get a draft number, and he had some friends that went. He said that the songs that were coming out at that time, like Fortunate Son by CCR and For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield, they were really personal to he and his friends. Poor kids from working class families who were called to go fight a war for rich politicians, let's be honest. I don't get political on this channel, but at this point, I think we can all unequivocally agree that Vietnam was a huge mistake. So many young men were tragically lost before their lives even began. Certain young men were protected because of who their fathers were, because they came from powerful families or what have you. My grandpa served, and my dad would have gone had he been called. And I actually asked my dad that, would you have gone? And he said, of course I would. When you're called, you serve. He was patriotic, but he was also a realist. Actually, here's what he told me a little bit about that. Because you told me the story behind Fortunate Son. A song had come on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
And you would have a personal story about it.
Well, I guess when you were younger, I would be afraid you wouldn't understand the lyrics, maybe. And yeah, The Fortunate Son was, back in the Vietnam War days, and Creedence would sing that, John Fogerty, and he'd sing about not being a fortunate son and having to get drafted and go to war. And I went through that. I picked a lottery number, and so we would discuss what brought that about, or different singers. And I was always interested in music when I grew up, so I'd know the background about these old artists, the Beatles, and Creedence, Clearwater, lots of, and Adam was always curious about them, so we would always ask questions, and I knew a few stories about him, so I would pass those on to him.
Oh, and then you always quiz me, when a song had come on.
Yeah, that's a game that came from work. I work with other people who like music, and then we would always listen to oldie station because other people at work were the same age as I was. So some of these one-hit wonders would come on, and then we would have a contest to see who knew who knew it was, the singer was, and it was always give you $1 million if you can guess who this is or how many notes. So I would always quiz Adam about when we'd listen to the radio who it was singing. So that
Did
was
he ever
always
get
fun.
one wrong?
Not after a while. He didn't get anything wrong.
Yeah, that was from an interview that I did with my dad some years ago, actually a few years before he died. I'm so grateful I have that. I've shared a little bit of it before, but I don't think I shared that part. But really personal, it's actually my favorite interview I've ever done. Well, getting back to Scarborough Fair, though. Scarborough Fair, it struck a chord with the era's counterculture, linking ancient longing and really modern protest in a way that made the song feel urgent and relevant. The unique harmony of Art singing the traditional melody with Paul simultaneously singing the counter melody, it gave the song really a haunting comfort, if that's a thing, right? I mean, it's haunting, but it feels peaceful at the same time. Now, one of the first rock and roll stories that my dad told me was that of the legendary musical feud between Neil Young and Leonard Skinner. But the real story isn't just public barbs and drama. The public narrative, songs and singers that seemed to spit fire, made it look like they actually hated each other. Yet the private reality was a lot more nuanced. There was definitely true artistic respect in that relationship. So at number 5, I've got Southern Man by Neil Young.
Southern man, better keep your head.
My dad loved Neil Young's voice. He thought it was one of the most unique voices in all of music. Whatever you think of him, it's definitely unique. He loved Skinner too. He had all the 8 tracks from both of these artists, and he would listen to them back and forth. But what was always talked about in public was the famous call out by Ronnie Van Zant when he sang about Neil's put down of his beloved Alabama. You know, when he says, well, I heard Mr. Young sing about her. I heard old Neil put her down. I hope Neil Young will remember that a Southern man don't need him around anyhow. You know, not quoting exactly, just kind of saying it.
Well, I hope Neil Young will remember.
It was a lyric that many read as a direct jab at Neil Young, but my dad would tell me that in truth, like I said, it was more nuanced than that. So Neil's Southern Man, that was a pointed critique of the South's racial issues, and then 4 years later, Skinner's response, of course, became one of the most iconic retorts in rock history. Now, Neil Young later said he was actually glad to be mentioned in their song. Proud even, that they played it with conviction and really meant it.
Mr. Young sing about her.
After Sweet Home Alabama dropped in 74, Neil didn't shut the door, though. He wrote several songs with Skinner as a gesture of reconciliation, including Powderfinger, which became kind of a bridge between them.
Shelter me from the powder and the finger.
Now, tragically, of course, Skinner's 1977 plane crash cut those plans short, and Neil wound up holding on to those songs for himself.
Remember me to my love, I know I'll miss her.
Beneath the public feud's heat, there was a quiet thread of mutual respect and a shared, complicated conversation about race and Southern identity and reality, one that's got a lot more depth than the headlines would suggest through the years. And that's what my dad really admired about both Southern Man and Sweet Home Alabama. To him, the songs were connected. He couldn't really play one without the other. And they were a great example of artistic expression of something burning inside an artist, something that really needed to come out, be liberated. And of course, after Skinner ripped him in Sweet Home Alabama, Neil wore a Leonard Skinner shirt in tribute. And then later, Ronnie Van Zant did the same thing. All right, coming in at number 4 on my list on my report of my dad's favorite songs, I've got one that became an unspoken respect between my father and I, and probably my favorite musical memory ever. He chose Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin here. Now, I've told the story about how I heard my dad play Zeppelin 4 on our record player, on our family sound system all the time, and it blew my mind. So one day I took it without my dad's permission. I snuck into my bedroom. I'll never forget it. I closed the door of my room and I sat down in the middle of my room and I pulled that beautiful black circle out of the sleeve and I placed it ever so carefully on the platter of my flimsy little, I think it was a Muppets record player. It was a kid's record player. Maybe it was a Spider-Man record player or a Sesame Street one. I had a couple different little kiddie record players. But man, I put the needle on the vinyl and I just sat there and listened. You know, this flimsy little record player and the sound coming out of those really bad speakers. I heard the first few chords of Jimmy Page's guitar. And man, I felt like I discovered the key to the universe, a portal into another world. And right at that moment, I heard a knock at my door. My dad was calling me up for dinner, and I panicked. I'm like, I'm going to get in trouble. I heard and pulled the needle off the vinyl, and I kind of pushed the record player out of sight. I went and opened the door, and, of course, I was ready for my dad to just let me have it for taking his record without permission. As I opened the door, he just looked at me with this, like, unspoken pride. And he said one word, Stairway? And I nodded. It's like it was this amazing moment between us. Stairway. One word.
Buying the stairway to heaven.
So to recap, he looked at me and he said that one word. Stairway? And I kind of nodded like, yeah. And he gave me this approving nod, knowing that the secret of the universe had just passed on to me. Stairway to Heaven, it's not a song. It's a rite of passage. We all have our own story with Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. Everybody does. What's yours? Tell me below. And of course, I've passed that secret on to my kids, and I hope they keep that secret going forward. It's just a mystical song.
It makes me wonder.
I believe that one of the qualities that makes Stairway to Heaven such a timeless classic is that mysticism. You know, the way the song was conceived in the first place was a mystery. Even to Robert Plant, who wrote the lyrics. Led Zeppelin, it was recorded at Headley Grange, the secluded old mansion. And Robert Plant was sitting by a blazing bonfire. And one moment he was clutching a pencil and paper. And he was kind of in a bad mood. And then almost as if someone else were speaking through him, his hand just started scrawling the opening lines of the song. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. Just legendary. That sudden, almost automatic writing fed all kinds of speculation about something beyond the ordinary, guiding the lyrics, giving the song that mystical aura.
There's a lady who's sure all that glitters.
Robert Plant spent much of the 70s answering questions about the lyrics of Stairway to Heaven. Really, he spent the last, 5 decades doing it. When people ask why the song clicks so much with listeners, he said it's because it's an abstraction, and that depending on the day, he still hears the song differently, even though he wrote the lyrics. He doesn't know what it means. The lyrics wander in wild directions, though. But that opening stretch, of course, about a woman who piles up wealth only to discover that her life has no real meaning, and it won't get her into heaven. It's part of the one thing that Robert would explain, calling it a woman getting everything she wanted without getting anything back. She's buying a stairway to heaven. It's about as much as he's gone into it. My dad, of course, had all the Zeppelin albums on vinyl and 8-track, and they were as much a part of my growing up experience as Sesame Street or Saturday morning cartoons. Actually, one of my favorite stories to tell is the school bully who was giving me a pretty hard time, bragging to a crowd of kids surrounding us that my dad can beat up your dad. And my response was fast and principled. Yeah, well, your dad listens to Conway Twitty. My dad listens to Led Zeppelin. It was the first mic drop of my young life. All right, so my dad's top 3 on this paper that I did, they're all related to a musical revolution for him that was really his origin story, the moment that made him a music lover, as well as the love of his life and the toughest breakup he ever experienced. The band I'm talking about here is the Beatles. So I'm going to put them all together in a way as I count the 3 down. We'll start with number 3. I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles. Now, my dad was just barely 10 years old when he was one of the 73 million people who sat in front of the television and saw a quartet of working-class schlubs play the Ed Sullivan Show on February 9th, 1964. He said it was the first moment in his young life that he truly felt alive. That historic performance on Ed Sullivan, it established a record for the largest TV audience in history. My dad said he watched with wonder and delight. He'd never experienced anything like it. These guys didn't look like teen idols, though. They looked like people that he knew. They looked like him. It led to his lifelong passion for the Fab Four. My dad was a true Beatle maniac.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
He used to say that he could never trust a man that didn't like the Beatles. Now, of course, he was joking, but I kind of agree. I have to say that when someone says the Beatles are overrated, I talked about this with Rick Beato. When they say they're overrated, I pretty much don't hear another word that person says after that. I can't respect someone's musical intellect or even their opinion when they say the Beatles are overrated. I mean, if you don't like the Beatles or their music, I understand that. That's fine. To each their own. We all like what we like. We like different things. I'm not talking about that, so don't get me wrong here. If you don't like the Beatles, I can respect that. They're not your cup of tea. That's fine. But to say they're overrated, that's just ridiculous. How can a band be overrated that influenced everything that came after? That changed culture in just a few minutes. I mean, the day after the Beatles played Ed Sullivan, 100,000 bands formed the next day. It changed everything. Now, at this time, the Beatles were already huge with American teens, and the build-up to their first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show was just fueling that frenzy. Their single, I Want to Hold Your Hand, had leaked into the U.S. early, and it shot straight to the top of the charts. Tickets for their shows were just impossible to come by. Some fans even bought wigs to imitate the band's signature shaggy hair. I mean, when the moment finally arrived at 8 p.m., the screams were ear-piercing. You know, the guys kicked off with All My Lovin', of course, the McCartney penned love song from their second album. And then they moved on to Till There Was You, a little bit of a slow song there. And then She Loves You, closed the show with I Star Standing There. And of course, I Want to Hold Your Hand. I Want to Hold Your Hand was historic in so many ways, but in another way, not just the TV audience, not the record that was set, but it was the song that started one of the most influential movements of the rock era. Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, urged the guys to write something specifically for the American market. Something that hadn't quite cracked yet. So late in 1963, John and Paul teamed up in the basement of Jane Asher's home, which was McCartney's girlfriend at the time. They crafted a song around distinctive, catchy chords, a chord progression that they all believed signaled a hit. And of course, they were right. It was an E minor chord that created the magic. And that progression became famously known as the perfect chord, and the chord that would change everything thereafter. Now, when my dad saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show for the very first time, he said he wasn't even really a big fan of music. He was collecting baseball cards, and he was watching the Dodgers and playing sports and things like that. He was just a little kid, 10 years old. But after that, after he heard that band, it started his lifelong passion for music. But it started mine too. Even though I wasn't even a twinkle in his eye, I wasn't even born yet. He told me it was the first song he ever played for me, when I was still in my mother's belly. And then later, when I was growing up, he'd play it on the family system, When I had a chance to meet Ringo Starr several years ago, I shared that memory with him. Ringo's manager called me up, tour manager, and invited me out to the show to be Ringo's guest. I think I've told you this before. I was blown away. I guess Ringo had seen the show and liked the show. And I'm like, a Beatle has seen the show? I'm going to meet a Beatle. I think I can die now. I can quit. I can, I was on pins and needles for days. So when I met Ringo, he came out as like, Professor of Rock. And mostly our conversation was me sharing those memories with him. I told him that he was the reason that I do what I do, the Beatles. And there was a cherished bond between my father and I. And I even told him that I played several Beatles songs at my dad's viewing. I even sang a Beatles song at his funeral. And Ringo was really gracious. He just smiled at me and he said, I think your dad's here with us now. I think he's proud of you. I lost it. Tears. Ringo's such a great guy. And I think he was right. I felt my dad there, his presence. And it was an amazing moment that had really come full circle from the first time my dad saw him on Ed Sullivan to me meeting Ringo, and it's just a really cool moment. All right, so coming into number 2, my dad chose a Beatles song that I was frankly surprised by. I didn't really know it very well back then when he told me about it. Of course, it's become one of my favorites, Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, and the end. He would say it was one of the most epic songs ever recorded. And it kind of goes into symbolic of their breakup to me. My dad always joked with me that one of the toughest days of his life and the worst breakup he'd ever experienced wasn't with a girlfriend, but it was the day that he found out the Beatles broke up. This song represented that to my dad, from my dad's favorite Beatles album, Abbey Road. The Beatles' Golden Slumbers blends poetry from long ago with a modern melody. Actually, the lyrics are timeless. They were written 366 years before the song came out by a playwright named Thomas Dekker. Paul McCartney, who wrote the tune, found the lines in an old music book at his dad's house. And he couldn't read music, so he basically improvised a new melody for the poem from 1603. It was originally titled Cradle Song. That fusion of 17th century poetry and 20th century pop created a nostalgic, powerful mood and a moving farewell from the band on their final album, Abbey Road, final recorded album.
I will sing a lullaby.
Golden Slumber serves as the prelude to Carry That Weight, forming the emotional heart of the famous Abbey Road medley. Lyrics draw on Thomas Dekker's 1603 poem Cradle Song, Paul McCartney, adding his own verses about longing for home. And it's just a wistful song. It's a mood that blends innocence and nostalgia and that touch of melancholy that McCartney's so great at, contrasting the ease of childhood with the harsher realities of life. Musically, its gentle piano and lush orchestration ease us into the heavier weight that follows. Using a shared tempo and recurring motifs to pull the medley together.
Pretty darling, do not cry.
It's also worth noting the context. It's recorded without John Lennon due to his car accident where he swerved into a ditch. John was a notoriously bad driver who got very nervous behind the wheel. John and Yoko's daughter Kyoko, they all required hospital treatment and stitches for facial injuries at the time. John received 17 stitches. Only Julian was physically unhurt, though he was treated for shock. Golden Slumbers is a moment that truly captures the band's introspective feelings as they approach the end of their phenomenal run as a band. Fittingly, the end was the last song recorded collectively by all four Beatles. It's the final song of the medley that constitutes most of side 2 of Abbey Road.
And in the end, the love you
So another interesting tidbit that my dad shared with me when I was doing this report back in the day, he said that the end featured the only drum solo recorded by Ringo with the Beatles. Ringo, he didn't like the idea of a drum solo, and neither did the other 3 lads from Liverpool. That's why this is particularly notable. And I think it's a great solo. Proves why Ringo's one of the best ever. Now it's time to share my dad's favorite song of all time. And I was really shocked when he told me this, but it made sense after he told me why. Got Maybe I'm Amazed by his favorite Beatle, Paul McCartney.
Baby, I'm amazed the way you love me all the time.
Easily one of the greatest love songs of the rock era for sure, but it's also a heartfelt public acknowledgement of gratitude. A lifeline that pulled Paul McCartney back from a dark place after the Beatles split up.
Baby, I'm afraid of the way I love you.
So when the band dissolved in 1970, Paul was shaken and he was adrift. He was lost. He actually retreated to his Scottish farm. It was Linda Eastman's unwavering love and steady support, though, that kept him going, urging him to make music again and to believe in himself.
Baby, I'm a man. Baby, I'm a lonely man who's in the middle.
The emotion in Maybe I'm Amazed, it feels like a direct lifeline, like I said, with Paul asking, in effect, how someone could do all these wonderful things for him and wondering how he could ever repay that debt. Hearing the track in that way lifts it from a beautiful ballad to a powerful tribute to a partnership that really sustained him and shaped his subsequent career and the love of his life. It makes you contemplate, what if Paul had never met Linda? Out of Hey Jude and Let It Be and all the stuff he wrote for Sgt. Pepper, this is the song he hopes to be remembered by most. It's not because, again, it was a big hit or anything, but it is because it captured the core of his love for the love of his life, Linda, and the life that she helped him to rebuild. But that's also why it's my dad's favorite song of all time. He said to me, direct quote, he said, That's the song. That's how I feel about your mom. Now, when he told me this, it was a very vulnerable moment for him because my dad came from the John Wayne generation and he didn't share his feelings very often, didn't wear his heart on his sleeve. He was abandoned by his real father, who was an alcoholic when he was only 8 years old. His father was a very broken man, my real grandpa. He was not only a drunk, but he was very abusive to my dad and my grandma. Now, this is a different grandpa than the one I talked about earlier in the show. My dad didn't share much about his early life, but when he did, man, I could see the pain in his eyes. He tried to put up a stiff upper lip, but when he met my mom, he said it changed his life. At the time, my dad smoked and he drank and had some other bad habits. He was kind of a wild kid. But my mom's love and acceptance and my mom's parents and my grandma and grandpa's acceptance and love for my dad changed his life. That's the grandpa I was talking about before. He quit all of his vices and he became the husband and the father that I knew, loyal and merciful and loving. He was all in. My dad told me that the lyrics of Maybe I'm Amazed, those lyrics were exactly how he felt about my mom and her unconditional love. He said he'd never had that kind of love before. He grew up in a broken home and he just didn't know that. Now, one of my favorite memories with my dad, actually probably my favorite, is when I was able to get Paul McCartney tickets and take him and my mom. My favorite part of the concert was just watching my dad as Paul played like this 40-song set. Every song was a joy just to see my dad's life pass before his very eyes. Every memory tied to every song. You know, every song that Paul would perform, my dad was just like a little kid. It was amazing to watch. And that's what I want to end with, where we share that memory in this interview. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Who's your favorite? You always tell me your favorite artist of all time.
Probably Paul McCartney.
Yep.
We got to go to the concert. You took me.
Yep. And that was a cool experience.
That was one of the best experiences of my life.
Remember to let her into your heart.
Thank you for bearing with me. That's an episode I truly had to do. I want to do episodes like this where it's more from my heart. I don't know how long I'm going to be on here. There's changes happening all the time. They're out of my control. But music is so important. And that's what I want to leave you with, is that I'm so grateful I got a chance to do this with my dad. And it was a written report, a little journal, a report that I did, a school assignment. But I would say with the technology we have now with our phones, go record your parents or your kids or your grandparents and ask them what their favorite songs are. I'm actually going to do that next year. And I think every one of you should do that too, because once they're gone, like my dad is gone, I'm so grateful that I have that video. And so I would say go for it and do it. It's just really precious memories that you can't replace. Leave us a comment. Let's have a great discussion below. 3 quarts in the truth, my friends.